Hello friends, my name is Marines, and recently I saw a tweet come across my timeline from someone complaining about people talking about the book After by Anna Todd. The essence of it was, okay, we get it, After is bad, are we done talking about it yet? And I know, right? Just kidding, this is a video about the book After by Anna Todd. I wanted to specifically tackle the main issue in that book, and that is the relationship between the two main characters, Tessa and Hardin. I guess the best way to start this discussion is to lay the groundwork from where I'm approaching it. I feel very strongly that media and messages in media matter. It is fiction, but fiction is never really just fiction. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. Fiction is part of how we learn and how we socialize. I think a lot of us can agree that fiction is part of the way that we learn empathy, and in that same way, I believe that when we internalize these messages from media or pieces of media, we can learn apathy. They can dull our reactions to certain behaviors or misrepresentations or things of that nature. After didn't sprout up out of nowhere. It comes from a long history, and more recently it was a copy of 50 Shades of Grey, which was itself a copy of Twilight. 3 huge commercial successes with sequels and movies and merchandise and millions of fans. My video that is number whatever in a long line of videos on YouTube talking about After will never have the same reach that After the book or After the fan fiction on Wattpad have. Hopefully though, it can reach some people and invite them to think critically about the story. I think there is a certain point where you as an individual can feel done engaging with content, and you certainly don't have to click on another After video, but I always get a little bit salty when people declare a conversation over just because they've had their fill of it. So why am I coming to this conversation so late anyways? I started reading After in October of 2016. Over on Snark Squad, we've been recapping popular books chapter by chapter. We started with 50 Shades of Grey. I think after that we almost moved on to After, but then it was announced that E.L. James was going to do another part of the series, and this time from Grey's point of view. So we recapped Grey, and after I recapped Grey, I was like, that's it, I'm done. It was awful, but also it was mostly the same book again. She just sold it to everybody. It was almost the same book. It was awful. So I was done with 50 Shades of Grey, and then Twilight's 10th anniversary hit, so we were like, okay, time to do Twilight, and we did all 4 books of those, and finally we moved on to After. For those of you that don't know, Anna Todd started publishing After on Wattpad. It was a One Direction fan fiction, and the whole premise of the story is, what if One Direction went to college? Simon & Schuster threw a 6-figure deal at Todd in order to publish what millions had already read for free. The catch, of course, was that the book couldn't be about Harry Styles anymore, so now it's about some dude named Hardin. The story in a nutshell is about a naive, innocent, virginal girl who goes to college, and her roommate has tattoos and goes to parties. That roommate introduces her to other college kids who go to parties and have tattoos, including Hardin. Hardin and Tessa are antagonistic towards each other at the very beginning of the story, but then they decide that they like each other, I guess, and the rest of the story is just this never-ending cycle of like fighting and making up. Because I did chapter by chapter recaps of 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight, and because of the clear connection between the 3 of them, it's hard not to draw parallels. I often ask myself which book was worse, and that's a tough question. The real answer is that the worst one was the one that I was reading right at that moment. My other answer is that they were all worst for different reasons. 50 Shades of Grey had more physical abuse, and no, I'm not talking about BDSM. Twilight had more weird age and power dynamics because of the supernatural element. 50 Shades was worse written than Twilight, but Twilight had more racism. Christian Grey was more likely to kill you and hide you in his basement, and Edward was more likely to eat you and leave your body in the woods. All of that said, there were so many times that I felt that After was worse than either of these just because it felt so normal. This wasn't the story of a billionaire playboy or vampires in the woods. This was just some girl who went to college and met a regular fuckboy and fell in love. I'm not saying that romanticized abuse is ever easy to read, and it's not ever easy for me to read, but there was something about how accessible this was that just, honestly, it sickened me and it infuriated me. Despite what the book might want you to believe, despite the fact that there are people out there who call themselves Hessa shippers, despite if you read this and enjoyed this, Tessa and Hardin are 100% in an abusive relationship. Hardin stops short of hitting Tessa, but he manhandles her, and he always is like grabbing her and putting her where he wants her. And anyway, hitting someone is not the only way that you can abuse them. Abuse can take on many forms, and any sort of search on the internet for signs of an abusive relationship also pretty much serve to provide a detailed look at what happens in this book. Number one, Hardin pushes for an exclusive relationship, and he does so using emotionally manipulative phrases like he can't live without Tessa, he can't sleep without Tessa, he doesn't know what he would do if Tessa ever left. Number two, both Hardin and Tessa see every other person as a threat to their relationship. They constantly accuse each other of flirting and use flirting to make the other person jealous. Number three, Hardin is incredibly manipulative, and when he's angry, he attacks Tessa in ways he knows will hurt her, insulting her, using previous gifts or favors and lording them over her. Pretty much anything to take advantage of her vulnerability. Number four, Hardin is controlling. Despite the fact that he never shares with Tessa what he's doing, what his job is, where he's going. He tries to control what Tessa does, where she goes, who she hangs out with, if she can drink, when she drinks, and who she talks to. At one point, he packs up all of her belongings in garbage bags to move her out of her dorm room, even before he even asked if she wanted to move out of her dorm room and move in with him. Number five, Hardin never takes responsibility for what he does. He constantly has an excuse. And here's the thing, it's not even always Hardin saying the excuse. It's Todd as the author and Tessa as the narrator that provide excuses for him. Being in Tessa's head and having those moments of clarity where she's like, I don't think this is good, because they happen. The author actually has Tessa think about how this is not right, but then Tessa thinks about ways to excuse his behavior. Number six, Hardin is inconsistent, and the story literally revolves around his narcissism and mood swings. We often get in Tessa's own thoughts and words her fear that Hardin is going to lash out. She doesn't want to say certain things or do certain things, like, I don't know, ask about his job or where he's going that night or why he stayed out all night, for fear that he will lash out. Tessa is constantly prioritizing his feelings out of fear. Number seven, Hardin disconnects Tessa from all of her friends and family. Tessa's mother is admittedly the worst, but by the end of the story, they have a rift in their relationship because Tessa picks Hardin. Tessa also dumps her boyfriend to be with Hardin. Tessa doesn't have very many friends, but she had her roommate, but then Hardin moved her out of her dorm room and nobody talks to the roommate again. Tessa is barely allowed to speak to her co-workers, and especially not the male one. She absolutely lives in a bubble with no one to rely on, and that is so clear at the very end of the story when we get revealed the big thing that Hardin did that's probably gonna break them up, and she wants to get away, and she has no way to get away from that place except for to go with the other dude who was involved in the really messed up thing that they did to Tessa. Number eight, Hardin makes fun of Tessa and her emotions constantly. The thing is that this is not supposed to be a story about an abusive relationship. We're told time and time again that these two love each other. The entire premise is that Tessa will never be the same after her first love or after her first time. We're supposed to see the fireworks of these two opposites attracting. All of these things that I listed are painted as like normal hardships of a relationship when it's really not. It's glorified abuse. The entire story hinges on one of my least favorite tropes of all time, and that is the main female character redeeming the male character with her love. Tying it back to 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight, those stories also ask you to accept the story of a man emotionally manipulating and abusing the main female character because of some trauma in their childhood, and often that childhood trauma is tied back to more violence against women. In 50 Shades, we get repeated scenes of Grey's dying and drug-addicted mother, not to give us any kind of sympathy for her, but in order to really hammer home that Grey had a rough upbringing, and this is why he behaves the way he does now. In After, we're told about a woman getting raped, and I'm not even sure that this woman gets a name. The story is there. Literally, the the rape of a woman is there in order to feed Hardin's childhood trauma. Many times in stories like this, the redemption of the male character comes on the back of further violence against women or further abuse or manipulative behavior. In 50 Shades of Grey, Christian doesn't see the error of his ways until he hits Anna in a non-sexual context so many times and so hard that she breaks up with him. That moment when she runs away is used to pivot his character. It's hard not to also use examples from other Snark Squad things, for instance, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Spike's entire redemption arc is sparked by an attempted rape. He attempts to rape Buffy. And this one hasn't really even happened yet, but I think it's going to, so don't even get me started on Raylo. And the problem with shipping Ray with the man who kidnapped and effectively tortured her, but maybe he'll feel bad about it later, and then using that as the pivot point for his character. At the base of romanticizing these relationships is the further idea that it is the job of the young woman to redeem these men, no matter what the cost is to them. There's this idea that it's okay to be with somebody who is 100% a jerk 90% of the time. If that 10% of the time he's a lesser jerk, he's a lesser jerk only to you. That's how we're supposed to see love in these stories. He's less bad to the main character than he is to everybody else. I'm not saying that if you've read or watched or enjoyed any of the things that I've mentioned that you're wrong, or that you as an individual can't differentiate between stories and fiction and what you like to see in fiction versus what you would put up with in real life. It gets kind of tricky when you think about how supporting these stories breeds even more stories like it, and in a wider view, how the success of stories like this informs society. But I get it, we probably each feel like we are able to draw those lines in our head. Part of that, though, to me, is engaging with media critically in this way. Part of being able to draw that line in your head is being able to look at a thing and name it and not excuse it. After by Anna Todd is a terrible book, and it romanticizes an abusive relationship. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.